Hi and welcome back to the Bolt and Hammer YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about paints. I'm going to go over some quick basic tips on your painting setup, the differences between the different types of paints that come from Games Workshop's paint brand called Citadel, and show some examples of those paints on my Tempestus Aquilon's kill team. Getting started with quick tips. So first is just a note to yourself. For me, this is the absolute hardest part of the hobby. I don't particularly enjoy painting. You might feel, if you're new to the hobby, a little intimidated by it. It's okay. Your feelings are valid. My first quick tips are just like, take your time, be kind to yourself. You're not going to be a paint master right away if you've never painted a mini before. So be patient with yourself. My first actual tip is get different size paintbrushes. Get like something small for doing some detail work, and get something a bit bigger, maybe 1.5 centimeters wide. Just those two brushes to get you started. The wider brush to do some priming or maybe a vehicle or something, and then the little one to do some details. Those two will get you pretty far. Second is find a way to secure your paint pot or you are going to spill. So I've got here what I use. These came in the Warhammer introductory kit. It's just a really basic piece of cardboard. This doesn't have to be fancy. They've got little holes in there that fit the little Citadel pots. But if you Google, say, Warhammer paint pot holder, you'll come up with a variety of products that you can buy separately that secure your paint pots. This is super important because the Citadel paints especially are top heavy and they'll spill and you'll lose quite a bit of money just running down the side of your table. Next, get a paint palette. I happen to use the same piece of cardboard that I use to secure my pots. You can see all the different colors over time there. It doesn't have to be like this. You can use any piece of cardboard, frankly. You can buy a paint palette at an art store. You'll need to water down your paints. You might want to mix some different paints to get different colors. Having a palette to work on is super helpful. Next, you can wash your brushes. You'll be spending money, maybe significant money on them, and just taking care of them will help make them last longer. And then lastly, a lot of the Citadel paints really need to be shaken pretty well, or they come out lumpy. So do make sure that you're also doing that before you get started. All right, so let's get into some basics on the different types of paints. So first are these primer paints. Primer paints go on your mini first. They give the other colors something easier to stick to than bare plastic. It's really strongly recommended that you prime your minis before you put on any other of these colors, just because you'll get like droplets of different colors and stuff. It's helpful. Which color you choose to prime can affect what the other colors that you put on top of it look like. You know, if you want something that's a bit brighter, use a white color. If you want something a bit darker, you can use black. I myself just use some really cheap art store paints, the black and white on the left. Citadel has these aerosol cans that you can use. The cans actually, from what I can see, other people online do an excellent job. For me, I live in an apartment. I live in Canada. It is minus 20 degrees outside. I'm not priming inside. I'm not priming outside. I'm using the art store paints. If you have a place that you feel okay to use the aerosol cans, they seem like they're great. So you can definitely go that route if it works for you. Base paints. These are the most basic type of color paint. The way to think about these is just, I want my mini to be this color. You need to water them down a little bit. Otherwise, it'll go on lumpy onto your mini. I think Corax White, which comes in the introductory kit, feels kind of notorious for this. You really got to be careful about mixing it up and watering it down a little bit. But these are pretty straightforward. Once you've primed your mini, you put on a base color and your mini is now that color. Layer paints look like base paints, but they are absolutely not base paints. The main difference here is that they are much less opaque. So especially if you have like a base yellow and a layer yellow, and maybe they look like they're the same shade, they are not going to give you the same coverage. That layer yellow is going to be much less opaque, and you're going to be able to see, if you have like a dark primer, you're going to be able to see that dark primer underneath that layer yellow. Trust me, I know from experience because I've mixed them up. You still need to thin them down. They're really meant for adding highlights to something, and so I've got a little picture here of a green librarian where I've used the Vulcan green, layer green, actually like a base paint. I had to add quite a few layers of paint onto this mini to get it to be this color, but it works. You can use it that way. But then I've used the Warpstone Glow layer paint to do some of the highlighting there, and to give it a lot of pattern on the armor, and I think it came out well for my skill level. But this is really what you're supposed to be using layer paints for. Shade paints are sort of the opposite. They are for adding shadows and shading to give more depth to your minis. These are very thin. They don't really need to be watered down in my experience. Because they're pretty thin, their effect really depends very heavily on the underlying color. So Citadel offers a variety of different shades. So really just make sure that you're picking the one that will match the underlying color that you're trying to shade. Contrast paints are sort of like an all-in-one. They're designed to just go on top of a prime color, and they are supposed to include sort of the basics of base, layer, and shade all together just in one pot. You can also thin them out a little bit to use like a very thin layer to add some highlighting or shade depending on the color of your contrast paint. But as you can see here just in my example photo, especially if you're using a lighter contrast paint, you might be able to like physically see your underlying prime layer, and you can see that I sort of went over this very quickly with my white primer, but you can actually see my brush strokes if you look carefully. I don't think that looks particularly good, so with a darker contrast paint, that's not going to be an issue. But if you want to use these extensively, it might be worthwhile to invest in a bit higher quality primer paint so that you just can't see the brush strokes anymore. Lastly, we have technical paints. These are for bases, and they're really cool. They're very thick, and when they dry in such a way as it looks like mud or cracked soil or something like that. They'll have some color with it. They're not really supposed to go on your mini directly onto the base, but they are really quite neat. Okay, let's get into some examples. Here I've got colors of the Tempestus Aquilin Rainbow, and just reminding you again, like, be patient with yourself. Challenge yourself to be a better painter, but don't punish yourself with this. This is a hobby. It's supposed to be fun. Take your time. Be kind to yourself. Okay, let's go through this. So first we have unprimed mini. You can play with these. They don't quite look right. Your opponent might get a little grumpy. Hey, why haven't you painted your minis? So you want to paint your minis. Okay, so this one, I've added a basic black primer coat. Again, I'm just using the low quality art store. I find it works for my skill level and my commitment and my painting setup. But you can see, you know, the drawbacks here is that it's sort of pretty rough if you look at that closely. If you really just cannot stand painting your minis, at least prime them. Prime them in different colors. Doesn't have to be just black or white, but just put in a really basic primer coat to make the experience a little bit more enjoyable for both you and your opponent. Now I'm getting into adding the base colors. I like to work from the innermost layer out, and then I go back over and fix any mistakes that I've made. So here I'm going to start with the green for the Aquilon's uniform, just using the Wa Flesh color. You can use whatever color you want, frankly, if you have this kit. But I wanted it to be green, and then I'm going to add some shades later to make it a little bit turquoise. So next I have a bit of a mix here. So I do have a brown that's suitable for leather, but I don't actually like the color very much. So I decided to mix a couple colors here to get a bit of a lighter brown. So I'm using Balthazar Gold, which comes in the introductory kit, as well as Uriel Yellow, which is a layer paint, roughly a 4:1 ratio there, and it comes out this very nice bright light brown leather color. And then I'm going to add a shade to it later to give it some texture. Next, I'm adding black. So even though I primed all my minis here in black, I still want to go over with the higher quality Citadel black, just because I know what my primer is like. I don't want to show that on the table. I don't want to see that on the table. So I'm putting the higher quality stuff on here for the black pieces, even though the primer is black. That Abaddon black, by the way, also does come in the introductory kit. Next, I have something that is not a Games Workshop color. This is from a company called Army Painter. It's a speed paint. Army Painter speed paints. That's sort of their brand name. These are like the contrast paints that Citadel makes. So they're designed to have the base highlight shade all together. Some other brands that people like to use include Vallejo. Both Vallejo and Army Painter have equivalents for base, layer, shade, contrast, technical paints. And you'll see folks on Reddit or in the game store, whatever, using a variety of different paints, not just Citadel. For me personally, this is actually the only paint that I have that's not from Games Workshop. Again, I'm not super adventurous when it comes to painting, but this actually I think works quite well. So I've been happy with it, and I've used it for some of the armor plating here. Faces are hard. I'm using just a layer Cadian Flesh Tone for her face, as well as a Abaddon Black for her hair. I tried very hard to do just like a black dot for her eyes, and you can see it's sort of run down her face. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm not going to punish myself by trying to fix that. I've added quite a bit on this. Starting with the picture over on the left, you can kind of see some cabling back there. That's for his las gun. I've got blue, Macragge blue, and Mephiston red for the cabling. I've added, those are both base paints. I've added Warpstone Glow, which is a green layer paint for his goggles and his camera lens on the top of his helmet. And then I've used another art store paint in gold for some of the insignia on different parts of his uniform, including his gun, but he's got another one on his backpack. I think this one actually is pretty nice. It came in a pack with the black and the white one, and this one is just a much better quality paint, even from the same set. So I feel pretty comfortable using it on those outer more layers. Then looking at the right, I've added shades, and this is the first time that I've used shades actually is on these models. And so I've got before and after. So I've used Agrax Earthshade on the leather, and then I've used Celia Green Shade on the Wa Flesh, and you can see that especially with the leather there, it's come out with some really nice texturing versus what it looks like without any shading on it in the picture below. So this is something that I experimented with. I challenged myself to go out and get some of these and try to put them on, and I've been really happy with the results. I think they look pretty cool. Okay, and then next we have the Nuln Oil shade. I would say that Nuln Oil has this weird cult following, especially on Reddit. People, I think, would drink this if they could. It's really effective on big pieces of metal, or I think that's what people use it for. Here, because I'm putting it over top of the equivalent of a contrast paint. This is, if you remember, my Army Painter Speed Paint. It's a shade called Broadsword Silver. It's already got a shade in it, and so for me, I was a little disappointed, but I think I'm just not using it the way it's intended to be used. Just there was already some of that shading in there, so I didn't notice a big difference on my model. But if you're using it over top of different colors, I think you'll be happier with it. And then lastly, I added some more Nuln Oil, and here you can see on these cabling, it's made them go from, hey, I'm bright blue, hey, I'm bright red, to looking like something that's been actually used, right? And so I think that Nuln Oil here is much more effective at adding some of that shading and depth. But then I've also added this technical Sterling Mud paint to the base, and I am so happy with it. Like, first time I've used it, I think it looks incredible. I'm going to add some more, I think, to this little warrior's boots to make it look like there's some mud on his boots. And I think it's the bee's knees. I think it's pretty neat. So I would definitely recommend experimenting with some of these technical paints. All right, so just to recap, be kind to yourself, be patient, challenge yourself to do a better job with your painting, but definitely do not punish yourself when you're going through any of this. It's all right to make mistakes, and yeah, have fun with your hobby. So I hope you learned something. I hope you found this entertaining. Please give me a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the Bolt & Hammer YouTube channel.